Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Open the box to become stronger. Chapter 41. In the middle of the night, Zoel covered his right arm, said hello to Lu Chen, and chose to leave. Although he had just become a superhuman, his mood was difficult to control. But he was still concerned about someone. For example, his parents who were still alive. For this reason, he had to return home, not only to make a reasonable explanation to his parents but also to arrange his future. This was not only responsible for himself, but also to better respond to the kindness of Lu Chen, the store manager, in the future. In response, Lu Chen, of course, did not comment, smiled, and readily agreed. From now on, I will not be alone. Looking at the empty shop, Lu Chen laughed dumbly. Immediately, he walked towards the second floor. As the owner of this shop, he has certain rights. For example, he can spend some points to change the layout of the entire shop. In this way, he took a look at the 46 points on the attribute panel. Lu Chen simply spent 5 points. After a moment, under Lu Chen's smiling eyes, the entire shop began to change. One is naturally to open up a room for Zor to live in the future. The second is that because of Lu Chen's needs, a place for cultivation is also indispensable. However, considering that the points are limited now, Lu Chen did not have high requirements, but simply opened up a very empty basement. It covers an area of more than 500 square meters and is 3 or 4 meters high. The system is sometimes very stingy. For example, creating something out of nothing, even a small piece of gold, requires points. But on the other hand, it is very generous. To open up a 500 square meter, very empty basement like this, only 5 points are needed, and a bedroom for Zor is also given as a gift. According to the system's explanation, the opened up space is nothing more than digging a basement where the store is located, which only requires some energy, while gold and other things need to be synthesized, involving corresponding calculations and material deduction, which cannot be solved by a few points. Lu Chen was silent about this. Obviously, the system is more than one level better than Lu Chen in terms of careful calculations. However, it is worth mentioning that the US dollars that customers use to buy jars belong to Lu Chen, and as for valuable items, Lu Chen will split the profits with the system 50-50. The reason is very simple. US dollars are just paper money, or even some numbers, which are dispensable to the system. The reason why money is needed to buy jars is just to raise the threshold. People who can easily take out 100,000 US dollars to buy jars are naturally elites among humans, or people with courage and courage. If you can't even cross the threshold of money, even if you are given a jar, it is just a waste of resources. Lu Chen did not comment on this aspect. 100,000 US dollars is not a lot, but it is not a small amount either. It is enough to keep 80-90% of people out. Some people are worried about their lives, so how can they have the financial resources to buy jars? And people like this are really not worth cultivating. Of course, it is not ruled out here there are some real elites on the surface. However, such real elites are definitely rare. Moreover, if he is really an elite, given a certain amount of time, it is enough for him to climb up. If he is destined to come, he will come. It can be said that the system has already grasped the human nature very well with the threshold of money. Perhaps the only loophole is the kind of teenagers who are only in their teens and have not even had time to turn over. For such teenagers, if they are destined to come to the store, Lu Chen can point out a clear way for them. However, in this case, the test is indispensable. Thinking of this, Lu Chen no longer pondered. After all, what he can think of at present, the system should have considered. And now, the most important thing is to spend some money and buy supplies. Ice Girl, Captain America, Natasha and the last blonde boy Zor successively provided Lu Chen with 100,000 US dollars. In addition to the blonde boy Zor who exchanged for a necklace of equal value. Lu Chen also has 350,000 US dollars. With this money, Lu Chen can easily renovate the basement, at least the necessary fitness equipment must not be less. At the same time, you can also buy some furniture to decorate the entire store. And here, Lu Chen tends to make the entire store more mysterious. For example, the lights can be dimmed. The flickering dim lights help Lu Chen observe the guests and maintain Lu Chen's mystery. Not everyone is like Captain America and Natasha, who have extraordinary powers. Most guests should be just ordinary people. And for people like this, the subtlety of the environment can make them alert. However, unfortunately, the alertness also means that their nerves are tense. The slightest negligence is enough for Lu Chen to take advantage of the situation. With this, the sale of jars is naturally decided by Lu Chen alone. Moreover, there is something that Lu Chen has been thinking about for a long time, and it is time to do it. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's lips moved and he whispered, "You won't stop me if I do this, right?" As if sensing Lu Chen's thoughts, a cold electronic synthesized voice suddenly rang in Lu Chen's ears. Ding, of course not. People are divided into different classes. It is possible that some people can buy jars but are unqualified. For such people, the system allows the host to choose one or two things from his jar. Lu Chen let out a tisk, and his lips curled up slightly. This was what he was looking forward to the most. What was the point of just watching others open jars? Such a fun thing, he naturally wanted to share in it. There are many ways to figure out a person, and Lu Chen has not decided which one to choose yet. However, there is no rush. After all, there are fewer customers now. And this is also Lu Chen's intention. He doesn't want the whole store to be known to everyone. If there are people lingering at the door of the store, it will not be a good thing for him. You know, there is a limit to the number of jars Lu Chen can sell in a day. There are only 16, and he can only wait until the next day after selling them. However, there are not too many people in this world who can take out $100,000. If he chooses to promote his store and make it known to the world, Lu Chen believes that countless wealthy businessmen and even all the poor will come at the cost of their homes. What should I do then? There are only 16 jars a day, who will they sell to? In this way, the first financial threshold designed by Lin Mo and the system to screen qualified people is meaningless. Therefore, Lu Chen prefers the current situation of letting fate take its course. If there is a destiny, it will come. For example, the ice girl and the blonde boy Zor, these two people are destined to be together, and they have enough wealth to support them. As for Zor's friends, sorry, they are not qualified, that's all. Apart from those who are destined to be here, the rest are some powerful characters, people who find clues and rush here. Such people are naturally Captain America and Natasha. With the support of the entire country, and these two people are also sharp, because the slightest news of the ice girl is also a manifestation of ability. In this regard, Lu Chen is naturally happy to let the two open the can. What's more important is that because of the two of them, there are more people who are no less than them, and they will come one after another. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's mind also emerged a series of familiar figures. I hope you won't let me down. While mumbling, Lu Chen stepped out and went out to purchase supplies while the sky was still dim. At the same time, the Avengers' headquarters. Step, step, step. With heavy footsteps, a very burly and tall figure slowly came. What was a little surprising was that this person had green skin. More importantly, his thick muscles, which were like those of a dragon, made people tremble slightly. The Hulk, whose real name was Robert Bruce Banner, was a world-renowned physicist. In an accident, he was exposed to a large amount of radiation from the gamma bomb he made, which caused his body to mutate. After that, whenever he was emotional and his heartbeat accelerated, he would turn into a green monster named Hulk. However, unfortunately, the monster named Hulk was a symbol of Bruce Banner's inner anger and Freudian repression. In short, Hulk was a consciousness in Bruce Banner's body that lacked reason and was dominated by emotions. Because of Hulk, Bruce Banner got into big trouble more than once. Of course, that was once. Natasha and Captain America looked stunned as they stared at the burly figure coming from a distance. Unlike before, the current Hulk actually maintained Bruce Banner's original appearance, but his skin color was green. More importantly, this Hulk's eyes were full of clarity. As if he had noticed their surprise, before they saw the real Hulk, the Hulk's loud laughter was heard. Now, I have truly mastered his power. Laughing loudly, Banner even shouted proudly, now I am the perfect combination of strength and wisdom. But before Captain America and Natasha could respond, Banner's face froze slightly. After a moment, his eyes widened. You are Natasha. Banner swallowed his saliva unwillingly in doubt. What a joke, could it be Natasha? Her long and beautiful hair fell to her shoulders, wrapped in a thin white shirt. At the collar of the shirt, her shoulders were as white as snow, with a faint blush, like the skin of an 18-year-old girl. No, it was smoother and more delicate than the skin of an 18-year-old girl. Not to mention, that face was 7 or 8 years younger than Natasha, but more beautiful. Of course, the reason why Banner recognized Natasha was because of the lingering charm between Natasha's eyebrows. She is still that, her. No matter how she changes, she is the woman who once influenced Banner to restore the Mad Hulk to calm down. That is why, even though she is too young, Banner still recognizes this acquaintance. Natasha nodded slightly, and inadvertently wiped her cheek with her hand, feeling the indescribable smoothness. Natasha rarely raised her eyebrows. Before, when Captain America was alone, she didn't notice it. But now looking at Banner's performance, Natasha suddenly realized that she seemed to have really changed dramatically. At this time, as if aware of his own gaffe, Banner wiped his hands and tried to hide his embarrassment. Soon, he walked to the place where Captain America was making coffee, and patted Captain America's shoulder skillfully. "Old buddy, give me a cup." "Cold or hot?" "It's cold, I need to calm down." As he said this, Banner glanced at the girl not far away from him. "Hey, Natasha, what's this?" Banner muttered quietly. His face looked a little strange. Especially when he felt that there was a consciousness in his body that seemed to be awakening, the corners of his mouth twitched fiercely. This is too bad. Seeing the current, Natasha, the Hulk, who had been unwilling to come out in several battles, is going to show up again. What a joke. Could it be that his emotions have fluctuated to such an extent? After drinking the cold coffee handed over by Captain America in one gulp, Banner also tried to calm himself down. Fortunately, Banner has now begun to try to master the power of Hulk, and he has been silent for too long, so that he has lost some control over this body. In this way, Banner did not really embarrass himself. After all, he just said, the perfect fusion of strength and wisdom. This is not scientific. You told me that you smashed a jar and found a pill that can keep people young forever. You also told me that you smashed a pair of dancing shoes that can dodge attacks. God, you have to be kidding me. Unbelievable, and hard to believe. Listening to Captain America's whispered explanation, Banner couldn't help but exclaimed, causing Natasha's eyes to twitch not far away. Fortunately, there were no outsiders here, otherwise the whole world would know about Banner's exclamation. At this time, looking at Banner who couldn't believe it, Captain America silently took out a toy doll. Then he pointed at the blonde doll and asked, "Do you believe that this doll can summon a real person?" "I don't believe it." Shaking his head like a rattle, Banner said decisively. "Yeah." Captain America nodded calmly, expressing his understanding. No one would believe it, let alone a physicist like Banner. But sometimes life really can't be considered according to common sense. For example, now, with a light throw. In Banner's bewildered face, the toy doll has already flown into the air. However, after a moment, as if he noticed something, Banner's pupils suddenly shrank. His fists clenched in an instant. A strange breath, a strange power, and an oppression that makes goosebumps rise. Boom! Without thinking any more, Banner turned around and punched. Then, bang! Accompanied by a terrible roar, the invisible shock waves suddenly spread. With the naked eye, the air waves were stacked, and all the debris in the entire conference room flew out. Even from a distance, Natasha's long hair could not stop flying. Not bad. A rare laugh, with a touch of joy and excitement. Looking up, Banner suddenly found that a blonde figure of similar size to him had appeared in front of him, claiming to be Banner with the perfect combination of strength and wisdom, but a little smaller. 2 tufts of golden bangs that were always raised. Wearing a uniform with the colors of this country, red, white, and blue. After a long pause, Banner suddenly felt a little familiar. And just as Banner was carefully looking at All Might, a light suddenly flashed in his mind, and his eyes widened suddenly, as if they were about to pop out, and he said in a lost voice. Isn't this the real-life version of that doll?" "Yes, it's the golden doll you saw before." Captain America's mouth twitched as he said this, and he rarely complained, "It can only be summoned once a day, what a waste." Well, his face froze slightly, and Banner still looked confused until now. But at this moment, it seemed that he had no choice. Following his gaze, his green fist suddenly collided with the blonde man's fist. Where the two fists collided, there was a faint hurricane. Very strong, really very strong. In the rare solemnity, Banner's heart was also shocked. This was the first time he saw someone fight him like this. Yes, the first time. As for other beings who could fight him, they were either gods or demons. And this blonde man was such a pure human being, this was really the first time Banner had seen it. At this time, All Might looked at the green figure in front of him and laughed. I haven't felt so happy in a long time. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang, and Banner's face suddenly changed. Then, an even more terrifying force came along his arm. Bang, bang, bang. He took one step at a time, and each step sunk deeply into the ground. Looking up, Banner was stunned for a long time. He was actually defeated by a human. You are very strong, perhaps even stronger than I expected. In the rare praise, All Might looked at Banner with unexpected seriousness. But I don't understand, what are you suppressing? The power in your body is obviously stronger than you can imagine, but it is curled up in a corner of your body, as if it is sleeping. Hearing this voice, Banner was also slightly shocked. Then, as if he thought of something, he pulled the corner of his mouth, raised a bitter smile and said, "This is the greatest power I can control. If I borrow too much of his power, I may lose control." Out of control. All Might was surprised but didn't pursue the matter any further. After all, he was an alien and it was a blessing for him to come here. He didn't have time to pursue the matter too much. It was just that he was curious about why this big guy didn't use his full strength because he was so happy to see a prey. However, it seems that he is not unwilling but unable to do so. Is it because of his strength? Or is it because his strength is too strong? All Might smiled and was a little speechless. After all, at the moment when he just exchanged punches, he did feel a threat. It was real, like a needle prick. The hidden power of this person might be very strong, incredibly strong. But it's a pity that he can't fight. Well, with a sigh, All Might immediately greeted Captain America, who he knew well, and then silently turned around and returned to the darkness. A moment later, a toy doll appeared in the void while Banner was stunned. Not long after, Banner, who seemed to have digested some information, sat on the sofa blankly. Is there such a thing? Oh my God, this is incredible, I really thought I was dreaming. Yes, I am just dreaming, let me sleep. Shaking his head, Banner murmured seriously. However, after a moment, Captain America pointed at the toy doll on the table with some reluctance, and said in a deep voice, "Admit the facts, Banner, haven't we encountered enough things that are beyond our understanding?" No, this is different. Rubbing his head, Banner stood up and stared at Captain America very seriously. Before, even if it was beyond our comprehension, it had a so-called scientific basis, but we just didn't discover it. Now, my worldview has been completely overturned. Well, I think it is necessary to go there in person. After thinking for a while, Banner made a decision. However, before he could speak again, Natasha's voice rang in his ears. Don't go now. Compared to going to that mysterious shop, the more important thing for us right now is to gather everyone and fight against Thanos who once took away everything from us. At this point, Natasha's eyes showed a rare coldness. At this moment, this beautiful girl had a bit of the sharpness of the former Black Widow. Wait, Banner's expression froze for a rare moment before he realized what was happening. He immediately looked at the girl not far away in astonishment. Defeat Thanos. Stupefied, Banner asked the question in his mind. Have you locked down Thanos' location? Yes. Natasha nodded and pointed to the rusty compass on the table and explained. This is the treasure I found in that shop. With its guidance, we can find the trace of Thanos. Quote. Banner was speechless for the first time. His curiosity about the mysterious shop increased. What a mysterious shop that even sells things like this. At this time, Liu Chen didn't know what happened to the Avengers. At this moment, he was renovating his own underground training room. By the way, he also renovated the store. The lighting is dark, but it should not give people a dim feeling, but should reveal a sense of mystery and elusiveness. Although the store counter is built into the system, it can be repaired by itself, but its appearance is not as good as those purchased from outside. After a rare moment of silence, Lu Chen also skillfully chose to move his hands and feet. After all, most of the supplies have been purchased. As for the rest, he naturally had to do it himself. But before he could start, Lu Chen suddenly let out a light exclamation as if he had discovered something. After a moment, he turned around and saw a familiar figure already at the door of the store. He had a head full of blonde hair and a black cloth wrapped around his right arm. However, compared to before, this figure had an extra knife in his left hand. Yes, a knife, but it was a wooden sword that looked like a child's toy. As if he had noticed Lu Chen's gaze, the blonde boy Zor suddenly grinned from afar. "Store manager, how come you came back so soon?" In a rare moment of suspicion, Lu Chen's eyes also turned to the back of the blonde boy Zor. Although it was a bit far away, Lu Chen still saw a black convoy. And in these black convoys, there were figures like servants constantly pulling out. As the store manager's waiter, how could I be absent for too long on my first day of work? Zor's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a very sunny smile. Then, as if he had thought of something, Zor suddenly asked, "Manager, you don't mind if I put some things in the store, right?" Put some things there. Lu Chen was stunned and did not react. However, after a moment, through the corner of his eye at the door of the store, he looked at the black figures in the black convoy who were ready to go, especially when he saw those black figures carrying a lot of good things that even money could not buy. Lu Chen also raised his eyebrows. This little guy, unexpectedly, is a smart guy. Not long ago, he just mentioned it to Zor inside, real good things can't be bought with money. No, to be more precise, it is not something that a guy like him who is unfamiliar with the place can buy with money. Unexpectedly, after only one morning, Zor got these good things and was ready to send them to the store. Tisk tisk, you are a good boy. Lu Chen nodded in appreciation and was also pleased. Although these things are not priceless, Lu Chen is a little embarrassed without channels. It's not that it's hard to get them, but it's troublesome. Instead of spending most of the energy to get these, it's better to abandon them. However, it's another matter for people like Zor to deliver these things to the store. With a smile, Lu Chen waved to Zor and guided the black figures into the store. Although the store is mysterious, except for the 16 pottery jars on the counter that are guarded by mysterious power and cannot be touched by outsiders, the rest can be set foot by outsiders. Therefore, under the guidance of Lu Chen, the black-clothed figures carrying heavy objects came to the bottom of the store in a short time and arrived at an empty basement that had just been opened. Put them down and you can leave. After saying hello, Lu Chen and Zoel stood side by side at the stairs quietly, choosing to wait. Okay. Nodding, these figures did not refuse. After all, before coming, they had received the arrangement of the master, everything was up to the young master. And not long ago, the young master Zor made a clear statement that the owner of this shop must be respected again and again. His serious attitude made even the bodyguards who guarded the family feel a sense of respect. In this way, after hearing Lu Chen's words, these people gave Lu Chen enough face. After bowing and saluting, the black figures had all chosen to leave without even hesitating. Only one weapon rack after another was left. Yes, weapon racks. And on these weapon racks, there are not only swords, sticks and various ancient weapons, but also a large number of modern weapons. And this is what Lu Chen rarely looks forward to. Various weapons, some military modern firearms are also included. Although this country allows people to buy guns, such a small arsenal is really not something that ordinary people can get. The reason why Lu Chen wants it is naturally because collecting and using weapons is one of his few desires now. Simply put, just like some people like to play games, some people like to pursue beauty. And he, in addition to running a shop on a daily basis, currently has a small hobby, which is to try to master various weapons. The reason for this is that when he used the one-time training card, the master Kasaka Shigur, who was known as the daughter of swords and weapons, and was good at various weapons, taught him a lot about the use of weapons and also gave Lu Chen some knowledge of weapons. As a result, Lu Chen naturally became interested in these weapons. P.S. There is another update today. I said yesterday that flowers, rewards, and evaluations will be added if they increase significantly. Hehe, now I will fulfill my promise immediately. Bang, accompanied by a dull roar, the two intertwined figures separated in an instant. However, before I could see the two figures clearly, the two figures suddenly intersected again. Bang, bang, bang. With rapid and powerful roars, the entire underground square was filled with dust. Amidst these continuous collisions, Zor's right hand holding the wooden sword could no longer stop shaking. It was too strong, really too strong. Even if the shopkeeper suppressed his physical strength to the same level as him, he still couldn't get away with it. His body even sent out a signal of almost collapse due to the intense exercise. He touched his forehead, and sweat flowed down like raindrops. However, even so, Zor bit his pale lips tightly, and a trace of heat still surged in the depths of his eyes. However, it was a pity that his body was not obedient after all. Little by little, he lost control, until his whole body staggered, as if he was about to fall down. If it weren't for the wooden sword hanging to the ground at the end, he might have collapsed in embarrassment for the first time. "You are already very good." There was a rare admiration in the faint voice. Looking up, a black-haired young man in a white martial arts uniform was holding a wooden sword in one hand and smiling. Squeak! The wooden sword tilted 60 degrees on the ground, dragging out a strange sound. Slowly walking to the weapon rack on the side, Lu Chen inserted the wooden sword in his hand into the scabbard. This wooden sword is made of iron wood. It is not only hard in texture, but also heavy as iron, which is very suitable for daily practice. And just now, it was the first time that Lu Chen and Zor had a sparring match in their lives. Yes, sparring. This kind of sparring is not only of great benefit to Zor, but also a great harvest for Lu Chen now. This is not to say that after a sparring match, Lu Chen's physical fitness will be improved again. It is because Lu Chen benefited from the perfect serum, and although all physical qualities of his body were over 100, he lacked actual combat. As for the gray space of the previous, one-time training card, although there were many actual combats, until now, Lu Chen could not tell whether it was the real space or the spiritual space. However, one thing is certain, that kind of actual combat is definitely not as exciting as fighting with Zor now. However, the only regret is that Zor has just got the ghost hand now, and even if he has changed his job to become a ghost swordsman, his average physical attributes are only about 30 or 40. Although it is much better than ordinary people, it is still far behind Lu Chen. As a result, Lu Chen naturally cannot enjoy it to his heart's content. Alas, Lu Chen shook his head imperceptibly, looking at the shaky Zor not far away, his eyes full of expectation. He was looking forward to Zor becoming stronger again, and then posing a real threat to him. You know, Zor is a ghost swordsman. Even if Zor is now Lu Chen's follower, it still cannot change the fact that he is a ghost swordsman. And the profession of ghost swordsman is a rare profession born for fighting. If you can fight with such a being born for fighting under the condition of being almost the same, the feeling for Lu Chen may not be ordinary, wonderful. Of course, it is too early to say these things now. Zor is still immature now, and he is very different from Lu Chen. After all, this little guy still needs some time to adapt to his transforming body. However, Lu Chen believes that this should not take too long. If Lu Chen remembers correctly, the growth rate of the profession of ghost swordsman is very fast. Taking a deep breath, Lu Chen calmed down the light excitement that had arisen from the fight. He then slowly turned his gaze to Zor, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Take a rest. There are food and water reserves in the corners here." As he spoke, Lu Chen lifted his footsteps and slowly walked towards the stairs. At this time, it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was almost time to open the store. As a store manager, he could not fail in his duties. Moreover, more importantly, he had planned to share a portion of the magical items in the jar. In this way, he was also somewhat looking forward to whether the new customer could win his recognition. If he could, it would be good, as he would have one more guy worth cultivating. If he couldn't, it would not be a big deal, as he could also get 1 or 2 magical items from the jar. Whether he could or couldn't, it was no loss. This was the way to do business. Using the saying from his previous life, yes, you made money, but merchants will never lose money. Thinking of this, Lu Chen also laughed dumbly. It must be said that he had become a real businessman not long after opening the store. After coming to the ground, Lu Chen first went to the second floor of the store and took a shower. A few minutes would not delay anything. After all, few people came to his store. Even if someone really came at this time, he would be able to detect some movement because of his spider sense. Not long after taking a shower and changing into a clean casual clothes, Lu Chen stretched his body and came to the store refreshed and started the afternoon business on time. It is worth mentioning that the daily business hours are set by Lu Chen himself. From 9 to 11 in the morning, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, and at night, it depends on his mood. Of course, if there are special guests, they will be treated specially. Anyway, the whole store depends on him, and his work and rest are naturally in his mind. For this, even the system has no right to interfere. The owner of a store is not just talk. Except for some problems with the points, the system's interference with Lu Chen is almost zero. Time always passes unexpectedly long while waiting. Looking at the deserted store door as always, Lu Chen couldn't help but think with a strange look on his face, did I open the store too remote? Why is there not even a single person? Although Lu Chen tends to go with the flow, if it continues to be so deserted and there is not even a single person, he will probably jump up in anxiety. And at this moment, step, step, step. With the sound of footsteps, Zor, who seemed to have recovered most of his energy, walked in from the back door of the store. Manager, no business. Zoel raised his eyebrows, which was rare, as if he was surprised. Our shop is all about fate. It's fate that makes people come here. Ordinary people can't find this shop. Lu Chen said faintly, and his face was a little ugly. Fate is fate, but no one came for such a long time, he was a little helpless. He was still hoping that someone could help him find a good thing. On the other side, Zoel shook his head imperceptibly, and he was a little confused about what the store manager was thinking. He was clearly looking forward to having customers come to the store. But he didn't do any publicity. You know, this small store only needs to display some things, and I'm afraid the threshold will be trampled. However, Zoel was also tactful and didn't say anything. After all, when he became a waiter, Lu Chen had already told him that less talk and more action is the kingly way. Although he was young, he also understood the deep meaning of the words. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, just do things quietly. And here, apart from other things, if he can do what the store manager has told him, he will naturally get benefits in the future. Zoel pursed his lips with a clear mind. Immediately, he came to the counter and took down a few bottles of wine and drinks brought in the morning. Then, in Lu Chen's slightly stunned eyes, Zoel's wrists flew, and the crystal glasses seemed to dance on his fingertips. What is even more amazing is that different colored drinks flow freely in the crystal cup, converge, and finally turn into a colorful. It's a rare sound, and Lu Chen's impolite voice has already echoed in the store. Quote. His face froze slightly, and Zoel remained silent. God knows how many glasses he had broken in order to master this skill. He originally thought that as a waiter, his superb bartender skills would win the praise of the store manager. Well, he had to admit that he thought too much. However, a moment later, a hand stretched out in front of him and even hooked a finger. Looking up, seeing the playful look on the store manager's face, Zoel's eyes twitched slightly, and he quickly poured a glass of prepared cocktail. Tisk tisk. After taking a sip of the wine in the glass, Lu Chen's eyes lit up. The taste was not bad, sweet and sour, plus the beating of carbon dioxide and the fruity aroma of wine, it was a drink that made people have an endless aftertaste. With such size, Lu Chen also continued to start a slightly long wine tasting and wait for the arrival of the destined person. Alger, a man who had failed in love, was drunk and smelled of alcohol. At this time, he was staggering on the street. Woman, humph, I don't need it. Drunk and mad, this man was shouting and yelling as he walked. But, a moment later, with a bang, his face came into close contact with the ground. Yo, even you are bullying me. As if laughing in anger, Alger raised his fist and slammed it hard on the ground. Bang! Amidst the extremely crisp sound, the corners of Alger's eyes twitched violently. Looking through his blurred vision, he seemed to see a bloody and colorful. Well, after a moment of hesitation, the drunk man suddenly sobered up. However, after a moment, as if he smelled something, he sniffed hard. Wine, good wine. With rare excitement, the figure staggered to his feet, and immediately followed the aroma of wine, staggering and walking towards a distance. Until he came to a staircase paved with bluestone, the man paused. He raised his eyes and vaguely saw the word, shop. Moreover, there seemed to be some demon. He, wine, wine, I want to drink. He didn't care, and he couldn't care. A drunk person is like a madman, living in his own world. At this time, he wishes the whole world belonged to him. In this case, why would he care about this somewhat mysterious shop? When this drunken man rushed into the store, Lu Chen and Zhou looked at each other in surprise. A customer? No, a drunkard. Staring blankly at this man who staggered towards the counter, aiming for the drinks, Lu Chen was rarely stunned. I brought these out from my cellar, so they may have a strong taste. Zhou said this with a helpless smile. He put down the crystal glasses he was playing with and walked out of the counter. Guest, there is nothing here that you need, please leave. With a sunny smile, the blonde boy slowly raised his arm and grabbed the shoulder of the man who was half a head taller than him. Then, he exerted a little force on his right arm wrapped in the holy cloth. With a bang, such a tall and strong man was suddenly lifted up. Yes, lifted up. It was like lifting a dumbbell, but Zhou's expression was surprisingly relaxed. It was at this moment that Zhou really realized that he seemed to be no longer an ordinary boy. With a slight smile on his lips, the blonde boy lifted up a man with his head on the ground, his feet in the air, and a confused look on his face with one hand, and walked out of the store. Bang, bang, bang. Step by step, walking slowly, the boy seemed to be savoring something, with a rare look of satisfaction on his face. Looking in the direction of the sound, Lu Chen, who had not moved for a long time, had already stood up, with a rare smile on his face. Guests are welcome, and finally someone who is meant to be with us has come. How can we ask them to leave? Quote. His face froze slightly, he looked up, looked at the drunk man whose mind was already blurred, and suddenly the corner of Zhou's mouth twitched. Good guy, I didn't expect you to be so lucky. Thinking strangely, Zhou took him to the counter again and put him down gently. According to the store manager, customers should be treated like gods. However, one thing worth pondering is that this store manager seems to be called Devil. At this time, Lu Chen had already started to select pottery jars on the counter. Bang, bang. After tapping it, the pottery jar in the middle made a very crisp sound, which seemed to indicate that something good could be found. Thinking of this, Lu Chen showed a rare serious look. However, if Zhou remembered correctly, these magical jars were all exactly the same. Cough. As if he had noticed Zhou's suspicious look, Lu Chen also coughed dryly. Then, he picked up the jar that he thought was good and walked in front of the drunk man. My guest, you only need $100,000 to own a magical jar. Cans. The drunken man was also shaking his head in a daze. I don't want it, I don't want it. Without waiting for Lu Chen to continue, he started to act like a drunk, saying, I don't want that woman anymore. What's wrong with being alone? I have endless money to spend and endless amounts of delicious food to eat. Quote. In the rare silence, Lu Chen also took a look at the drunk man. His face was full of stubble and he looked dirty. However, he should not be very old. However, in terms of appearance alone, he was not a handsome guy and was a bit fat. Well, a man who failed in love was not tall and handsome. Shaking his head, Lu Chen also sighed rarely, and then showed some of his businessman's nature, and explained with a smile. This jar has all kinds of magical things. As he spoke, Lu Chen leaned closer and said with a smile, for example, a lifelike doll, not only does it feel like a real doll, but even its facial expressions are lifelike. Besides, aren't you frustrated in love? Just send this jar, a true love pill to redeem your true love, it's not nonsense. Lu Chen did not feel guilty about this nonsense. After all, the things that can be opened from this jar are beyond your imagination. However, it depends on your luck. According to the previous ratio of opening jars, it should not be too bad. Suspicious, Lu Chen handed the jar to the drunk man. However, at this time, as if he was a little sober, he shook his head and said in a daze. Are you telling the truth? Of course. Nodding, Lu Chen also grinned. You won't suffer any loss or be cheated with me. Besides, if you don't believe me, you can check the goods first. Oh, it seems so. After a pause, the drunken man lowered his head, staring at the jar in his hand in a daze, and finally asked, how to use it. Smash it hard, and let out all the dissatisfaction and resentment in your heart. Before Lu Chen could finish his words, a crisp sound of pop echoed throughout the store. Along with it was a dazzling golden light, which bloomed. As always, there were three things shrouded in golden light. An ancient scroll, a bottle of potion emitting a charming halo, and the last thing was a black ring. After taking a closer look, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. Not bad, really good. These things are all very good. This scroll is a kind of magic. Ascension, defective, sacrificial magic. After using it, choose an animal as a totem and gain extraordinary power. Note: can be contaminated. Side effects: whatever you choose will become what you want. Unless you don't want to be a human anymore, don't use it. Introduction: the national magic of the once powerful empire, Shurima. People who ascend are called ascenders or god warriors. After being contaminated, they are called dark descendants. For such a magic, if a good animal is chosen, Lu Chen believes that it will create a guy with strong strength. Of course, it is definitely unrealistic to want to become one of the extremely powerful ascenders in Lu Chen's memory. However, it should not be difficult to surpass ordinary people by several levels. Thinking of this, Lu Chen hooked his finger at Zor, and then whispered a few words in Zor's ear when he came to him. The more brutal, the better, right? In a suspicious voice, Zor looked at the drunkard not far away. His eyes were a little more strange. Well, the more brutal, the greater the potential. Nodding, Lu Chen naturally began to arrange the fate of the drunk man. After all, he was the customer who bought his pottery jar, and Lu Chen had to be responsible for his follow-up. Otherwise, Lu Chen, a businessman, would be a swindler. Moreover, according to the tone of the drunk man, he should not reject this magic. After all, compared to strength, the appearance that broke his heart should be harmless. It should be. Thinking in this strange way, Lu Chen's eyes focused on the second item again, a bottle of potion emitting a charming halo. Heaven potion. After drinking it, even if you are seriously injured, you can recover to your prime in a moment, not only physically but also mentally. Side effects. People with dark powers will definitely suffer a backlash if they take it. If they are not careful, they may even explode and die due to energy conflicts. Introduction. The legendary holy water, which condenses the power of light, is also known as the holy water, blessed by the Lord. Well, it's a very good thing. At a critical moment, it can even save your life. The heavenly potion was a rare life-saving item. Even for Lu Chen, it was an exciting item. However, the moment Lu Chen touched the potion, his eyes suddenly flickered. No, let's leave it to him. With a sigh in his heart, Lu Chen has made a decision. Although this potion is valuable, it is not as useful to him as this guest. Moreover, if this guest uses ascension magic, then he may have a certain demand for the heavenly potion. However, the most important thing is that Lu Chen has set his eyes on the last item. Shadow Ring, a magical equipment from a fantasy world. Shadow Ring. It is said that this ring can store the shadow of your most beloved person, but the price is to drop a drop of your own blood. Ability. It can open up a small shadow space to store some items. Note: if it can store a person's shadow, it can be used freely to a certain extent. This is a very interesting ring. Not only does it have unexpected convenient abilities, but it also has a very good appearance. It is as black as ink, inlaid with complex and delicate patterns. Although the color is a little different from the ring in Lu Chen's memory. But it is obvious that this ring is more suitable for men to wear. Smiling, Lu Chen reached into the golden light with one hand and took out the ring. Immediately, he put it directly on the index finger of his right hand. Wearing a ring on the index finger of the right hand has a special meaning in the culture here, symbolizing single nobles. Lu Chen disagreed with this. Although he is currently single, it is undeniable that he wears the ring on the index finger of his right hand just to make it look better. Slowly opening his right hand, Lu Chen looked at the ring with satisfaction. It was neither too big nor too small, just right. Moreover, this ring on Lu Chen's slender finger made him look more elegant. It was hard to explain, but he just felt a darkness covering Lu Chen, blurring his figure. System, I will gladly accept this ring. Lu Chen said with a smile after a rare greeting. Ding, please make your own judgment, but may I ask, what is the basis for your judgment of a guest? Intuition. Lu Chen pursed his lips and uttered two simple words, then as if he had thought of something, he added again, there are many ways to judge a person, whether it is family, background, or mind and character, they are all a criterion for judgment, but for a businessman, there is only one biggest criterion for judgment, that is, the first impression. At this point, Lu Chen's eyes slowly raised and pulled to the big man who had collapsed on the ground not far away, as if he was drunk and unconscious. It must be said that this is a very unqualified guest. No matter from all aspects, it is not worth looking forward to. The fragile mind and weak character, and just coming here for the smell of wine, you can also see his impulsiveness and immaturity. Guests like this are indeed not worth Lu Chen's expectations. If it is according to what Lu Chen thought before, it would not be too much for Lu Chen to get two of the items he opened. But, fortunately, this guy opened a good magic, ascension magic. With such magic that is enough to transform him, his future makes Lu Chen more looking forward to it. In this way, Lu Chen also chose to leave the heaven potion to him. And soon after this, step, step, step. With heavy footsteps, the blonde Zor, who had left long ago, slowly returned under the cover of the night. However, what was somewhat concerning was that he had a huge metal cage in his hand. Bang, bang, the whole metal cage was shaking from the wanton collision. It's so noisy. A rare cold voice, a cold light flashed in the depths of Zol's eyes. Boom, with the sudden pressure, the huge and ferocious creature in the metal cage trembled violently and crouched down again. The crocodile, and not just any crocodile, was 3 or 4 meters long, curled up in the cage. It was dark green, with strong and sturdy muscles, like a warrior's armor, majestic and awe-inspiring. Roar. As if roaring, the crocodile opened its mouth, revealing its sharp and ferocious teeth. Sarcosuchus, also known as the muscle crocodile, is an extinct crocodile. In terms of ferocity, it is definitely among the top 3 crocodiles. Quote, quote. The corners of Lu Chen's eyes twitched rarely, and he was also slandering in his heart, you said it was extinct. How can it still be obtained? As if he had noticed Lu Chen's thoughts, Zor also laughed and said, Manager, have you forgotten what my family does? Biology, scientific research, group. Vaguely recalling the words that Zol said, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly, a group engaged in biological research. Nodded. Zor also grinned, and said proudly, to be precise, it is a group engaged in biological research such as cloning and bloodline. At this point, Zor added in a low voice, if I am not mistaken, my father may be cooperating with many major forces, among which there should be the military. So that's it. Listening to Zol's narration, Lu Chen's eyes flickered rarely. No wonder this little guy was able to get him an arsenal. He didn't expect that this waiter who came by chance actually had such a background. However, this is really good. With this immature emperor crocodile and the ascension magic that he had used not long ago, Lu Chen looked at the drunken man lying on the ground not far away and fell into a deep sleep, and he also had some expectations. If his plan could succeed, a real humanoid beast would really come. But, unfortunately, this guest was still sleeping. Without the customer's permission, Lu Chen would not act on his own. After all, if the customer was not satisfied with the transformation, Lu Chen had no means to change him back to his original state. Not long after this, the drunken man who had been lying on a sofa in the store suddenly stood up. Rubbing his head with a headache, Alger was a little confused at the moment. If he remembered correctly, he seemed to have gone to a strange store and smashed a jar at the instigation of someone. Jars. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed, and Alger looked at the ceramic jars placed on the counter not far away. He was also startled. After a moment, he looked around. In Alger's stunned eyes, the blurry figure in his broken memory slowly overlapped with the black-haired figure not far away. Who are you? The owner of this shop. Laughing, Lu Chen, who had been waiting for a long time, also looked at the big man who had woken up with a smile. Although he was still full of alcohol, there was a faint gleam of brilliance in the depths of his eyes. It seemed that this guy was not as bad as he imagined. At least, he had some shadows of a smart man. Thinking of this, Lu Chen pointed to the scroll not far away and said with a smile. That's your stuff. Belongs to me. After a long pause, Alger looked in the direction Lu Chen pointed. After a moment, he saw a scroll shrouded in golden light. Yes, a scroll. And, more importantly, the scroll was suspended in the air. Is it fake? Alger exclaimed with his eyes wide open, and then he ran to the scroll and ran his hand back and forth under the scroll. Really hanging in the air. It was a little unbelievable, but Alger was not too shocked. After all, there are many mysterious forces in this world. From time to time, a superhero will emerge to save the world. For example, the Spider-Man who disappeared for a long time was once his idol. However, at this time, as if he realized something, Alger looked at Lu Chen with a trace of inquiry and rare solemnity. Have I met a superhuman? With mixed feelings, Alger had never expected that after his failure in love and getting drunk, he would actually meet such a legendary superhuman. At this moment, Lu Chen's voice slowly rang in the air. There is a magic in the scroll called Ascension. If you wish, you can choose an animal as a totem to gain extraordinary power. Extraordinary power. His pupils shrank slightly, and Alger's Adam's apple moved subconsciously. After a moment, as if he had thought of something, Alger spoke, which was rare. Can you tell me more about it? Lu Chen let out a light sigh. He had not expected that this middle-aged man with a stubble on his face could have the rationality to resist the temptation of supernatural power. But it was okay. Some things should indeed be explained. After half an hour, the store had locked its door. At this time, an unkempt man was staring at a necklace hanging around his neck. Inside the necklace was a photo of a girl. The girl was beautiful, but unfortunately she no longer belonged to him. Recalling the girl's resolute departure, Alger tightly grasped the necklace, his face full of bitterness. This is fine. While murmured, Alger's eyes slowly turned to a scroll not far away, and a huge creature in a metal cage further away. The Sarcosuchus, an ancient giant top predator, was already extinct in the eyes of ordinary people. Now, it was trapped in a cage in front of Alger's eyes. And this was the totem that the mysterious shop owner personally selected for him. If he was willing, maybe in the next second, he could become an extraordinary person who was no less than a superhero. Call. Exhaling deeply, Alger's eyes flashed with determination. If that girl was once everything to him, then now that he has lost that girl, it is time for him to change his identity and continue living. Even if this identity may not be accepted by the world, he has no choice. After all, this is the only way in front of him at this time. As for leaving, I'm sorry, he can't do it. Any man who has yearned for the extraordinary will not choose to leave at this moment. After living for more than 20 years, he has spent his days in mediocrity, and even his only support has chosen to leave. What is there to be nostalgic about in a life like this? After clarifying his heart again, Alger slowly stood up. Manager, please give me a chance. In the firm voice, Alger's figure seemed to stand up a little. Okay. With a light laugh, Lu Chen grabbed the scroll in the golden light. With a crisp sound like a brocade being torn apart, the entire scroll was torn apart. With a loud boom, an illusory ancient altar slowly emerged in the void. What was even more amazing was that this altar cast 2 rays of light. Ah! A shrill scream suddenly sounded in the store. Looking for the source of the sound, Alger's body suddenly began to tremble violently. Along with it, the altar suspended in the void slowly rotated. It spun faster and faster until it was too fast to see the shape of the altar. At this moment, the Emperor Crocodile, which was also covered by the light, also roared suddenly. Roar! The shrill roar was filled with extreme despair and indescribable fear. However, facing the mysterious and strange magic, Ascension, its roar could not change anything. Perhaps, it only made Lu Chen, who was tasting wine, slightly startled. It started. In a rare state of anticipation, Lu Chen also put down the crystal cup in his hand. On the side, Zor saw this and his eyes narrowed slightly. If he remembered correctly, the store manager seemed to be looking forward to the next existence. I don't know how long it took, the whole store was suffocatingly quiet. And in this dead silence, a storm was coming out from the center of the store. Boom! The sudden vibration brought the storm to an abrupt end. Looking up, Lu Chen and Zor were surprised to see a huge shadow emerging from the storm. It was a huge beast with a sturdy body. Through the storm, some crocodile features could be vaguely seen. For example, the tail that was just shaking was like a python's outstretched tail. Roar. Like the roar of an ancient beast, revealing desolation and coldness, this huge figure has slowly stepped out of the storm. Bang. The heavy footsteps caused the floor of the store to tremble violently. However, before Lu Chen could say anything, a boom sounded, accompanied by the sound of wind and thunder, and a huge shadow occupied his vision. Interesting. Lu Chen chuckled and clapped his hands. Bang. The spider's power was magnified proportionally, with a force of tens of tons breaking through the air. Boom. There was another loud noise. In Lu Chen's slightly surprised eyes, the huge figure with fierce light burning in his eyes like fire actually retreated a few steps. Snap. With a kick on the ground, the giant rushed out again. The instinct and the increasing wildness constantly devoured his remaining sanity. Even though he knew that the person in front of him should not be provoked. But his body moved uncontrollably, and he launched an attack with the force of thunder. Unfortunately, he was facing Lu Chen, who had completely digested the perfect spider serum. His palm suddenly opened, and with the passing of silver light, 5 spider threads broke through the air. Swish, swish, swish. Then, before the giant monster could react, 4 spider silk threads had already nailed its limbs. The terrifying force was transmitted to the giant monster through the spider silk threads, causing the giant monster to retreat again and again. Plus the last spider silk thread turned into a spider web, covering the giant monster's mouth. After a moment, the giant monster was firmly locked in the store by the spider silk threads. At this time, Lu Chen raised his eyes slightly and had the leisure to look at this terrifying figure. The crocodile head and the huge mouth seemed to be roaring, opened wide, revealing seemingly very sharp teeth. The whole body seemed to be covered with crocodile scales, with a hard texture. It is worth mentioning that this guy's limbs are short and strong. Especially the claws on the limbs, which are flashing with a cold light. Alger crocodile transformation. His wildness is increasing with time, and it is impossible for ordinary people to tame him. His brutal instincts have devoured his last sanity. Feeling the information given by his heart, Lu Chen also shook his head with some regret. It's a pity for such a strong man. Yes, a strong man. Strength 150, Speed 110, Spirit 5, and Constitution 220. Among the 4 attributes, 3 of them are over 100, and the Constitution, which is the defense that ordinary people often say, is as high as 200. It can be said that such a strong man has only 5 mental attributes, which is inferior to ordinary people. It can only be said that the wildness and brutal instincts that are increasing with time are too terrible, so that such a person who he has high expectations for has become a real beast. It must be said that this is indeed a pity. You know, now may just be the beginning of Alger. If he is polished a little, his strength will not leap forward, but it should not be a problem to go up a few levels again. But now, this person can only be said to be completely over. Having become a real beast, not only has it lost its value in cultivation, but its existence is also of no benefit to Lu Chen. Alas, what a pity. Shaking his head helplessly, Lu Chen had already raised a revolver in his hand. Gold intertwined with blood red, a very scary pistol. Every time a shot is fired, it indicates that the power of the next shot will increase exponentially. Now, this golden revolver has been fired twice, and its power has increased by more than 4 times. In other words, if the next shot is not empty, its power should be enough to penetrate the defense of this monster. If it is empty, it's even better. Spending some time to load ammunition, the power of Lu Chen's next shot is worth looking forward to. However, the only thing that Lu Chen is more concerned about is that the bullets fired from this golden revolver seem to have a certain degree of backlash. If he is not careful, the backlash caused by too strong power may also cripple Lu Chen's arm, or even endanger his life. Tisk tisk, after 2 misses, the backlash shouldn't be too strong, right? Lu Chen smiled playfully and pulled the trigger. Bang! Along with the crisp sound of a gun, a flash of lightning actually broke through the air. Yes, lightning. It was really as fast as a flash of lightning. Even Lu Chen's spider sense only captured the slight vibration of the air. As for the eyes, nothing could be seen clearly. However, along with it, there was a blood hole between the eyebrows of the huge crocodile figure that Alger transformed into. Scarlet blood continued to flow along the eyebrows, and the eyes of this newly born behemoth suddenly dimmed. However, at this moment, Lu Chen let out a light exclamation. In his astonished eyes, this behemoth actually shrank slowly, its skin wrinkled like wet parchment, and its chest collapsed inward like rotten fruit. Chapter 51. A few days later, the shop was as quiet as ever. But compared to the past, there was one more figure in this shop. This was a very sturdy figure, with muscles as strong as granite. At first glance, the whole person was burly. However, surprisingly, this figure had a clown-like mask on his face. It was this clown mask that made people ignore some things, such as the fact that this person's skin was yellow-brown and there was a thick tail behind him. Alger, the crocodile man, after using the ascension magic, he had originally become a beast. But before he died, he actually regained his consciousness, but his breath was weak. Fortunately, he also opened a bottle of heaven potion. With this bottle of potion, he recovered. However, considering the growing wildness and brutality in his body, Lu Chen also did a bold experiment. He temporarily lent his lucky mask to this guy. The lucky mask has crazy side effects, and this side effect is exactly similar to Alger's growing wildness and brutal instincts, and they are all forces that affect people's sanity. As for whether they are competing with each other, making Alger's sanity survive in the cracks, or completely engulfing Alger's sanity, that is not what Lu Chen considers. He is just doing his last duty as a store manager. However, surprisingly, Alger, who put on the lucky mask, actually maintained some of his sanity. Although he is a little dull and stupid at the moment, he did not have the crazy behavior before. Moreover, because the lucky mask is the most original ability, it can make people subjectively think that he is a clown, thus ignoring his crocodile body. It saves a lot of trouble. Smiling, looking at Alger, who was wiping the counter not far away and looked a little honest, Lu Chen nodded with satisfaction. Not bad, there is a possibility of recovery. At this moment, on a street far away, a burly figure wrapped in a gray coat was slowly coming in this direction, even in a place that Lu Chen could hardly notice. It should be this area, right? Touching his chin, the Hulk in a gray coat, Dr. Banner, also murmured rarely. This is the 4th day since he knew about the mysterious shop. Ever since he knew about it, he has been thinking about this mysterious shop. Unfortunately, Natasha and Captain America, for some unknown reason, rarely joined forces and told him seriously, don't go. Even if you go, you have to find Thanos and complete the crusade before you go. Well, hearing their rare serious and somewhat warning tone, Dr. Banner also suppressed the thoughts in his heart. However, the good times did not last long. When looking for their former companions, Captain America and Natasha suffered repeated setbacks. Iron Man has been brooding over it until now and refused to show up. For this reason, Captain America had to go and invite him in person today. However, according to Dr. Banner's guess, it should be that Natasha and Captain America did not produce evidence to convince Iron Man. Otherwise, with Iron Man's character, it is impossible that he would not show up. After all, no one is more qualified to be called a superhero than Iron Man. As for the other side, Natasha also did not find the shadow of Hawkeye. This former veteran of the Avengers has not been heard from since then. In this way, the current ruler of the Avengers has also begun an endless search career. And in the end, he, Banner, was arranged to find Thor. Well, thinking of Thor, that idiot, Banner touched the back of his head and decided to visit this mysterious shop. Anyway, that guy must be hiding in that corner, and he can't run away. This should be it, right? Dr. Banner narrowed his eyes slightly outside his black robe, looking at a small building not far away that seemed out of place among the tall buildings, and his mouth corners slightly raised. Although Captain America and his team did not give him much information, based on the records of Captain America and Natasha's whereabouts in the past few days, Banner quickly guessed the approximate location of the mysterious store. And now, seeing the word, Devil, engraved on the plaque of the small building not far away, he should have found it. He smiled, raised his footsteps, and this burly figure strode towards the direction of the store. Bang, bang, bang. Heavy footsteps sounded from the floor of the store, and a burly figure shrouded in black robes came into Zor's sight. But before Dr. Banner could speak, a voice sounded in his ears. "Everyone who comes is a guest, but our store is closed at this time, please come at 2 p.m. As he said this, a polite blonde boy came to Dr. Banner and said with a smile, "Rest." After a moment's silence, Dr. Banner asked politely, "I don't know if I can sit here and wait." This. After hesitating for a long time, Zor did not refuse out loud. He just looked at the burly figure in confusion and silently chose to turn around. Not an ordinary person. Zor's eyes narrowed slightly, and his right arm covered by the holy cloth trembled slowly. For some reason, he was a little trembling in front of this figure. It was different from the feeling when facing the store manager. It was hard to explain, but it was real. It seemed like fear. No, it was not his fear. Zor, who realized this, paused slightly, turned around, and took a deep look at the mysterious figure who was already sitting on the sofa. To be precise, this might be a man that even ghosts and gods are afraid of. Thinking of this, Zor's eyes became deeper. On the second floor of the store, Lu Chen took a rare nap. As for the arrival of the guest, he naturally knew about it. Moreover, he also knew that this was not an ordinary guest. In the store, if the invincible defense was his passive ability, then another ability, perception, was a bonus from the system. As long as he stepped into the store, Lu Chen would be able to see his face through layers of obstacles. And at this point, it should be to prevent guys like Loki from buying jars at low prices multiple times under different identities. Lu Chen smiled, took a bite of fruit, and chose to get up. How could he not treat such a distinguished guest well? Step, step, step. Footsteps were heard from the second floor, and with a slight exclamation, Dr. Banner, the Hulk shrouded in a black robe, slowly opened his eyes. After a moment, a thin figure came into view. He was indeed very thin. Compared to his burly body, Dr. Banner even doubted that he could be killed with one hand. However, it was such a figure that made Captain America and Natasha so afraid. I have to say, this world is really amazing. Thinking of this, Dr. Banner slowly stood up. Store manager, right? Yeah, Lu Chen nodded, but he didn't deny it. Then, as he passed by, he grabbed a jar on the counter and said with a smile. Quote. In a rare moment of silence, Dr. Hulk Banner also took a deep look at the black ceramic jar in Lu Chen's hand. It was hard to imagine that such a jar could produce such magical and strange items. However, one thing that Dr. Hulk Banner was more concerned about was how did this guy know that he was here to buy a jar? In a rare moment of daze, Lu Chen also handed the jar to the Hulk. In this shop, no one can hide from my eyes. As a member of the Avengers, Dr. Hulk Banner has long been admired. Hearing these voices, the Hulk Banner raised his eyebrows slightly. So that's how it is. However, after a moment, Banner changed his mind and understood. As a member of the Avengers, everyone knows how good the personal relationships of each member are. Even if Iron Man Tony and Captain America are slightly at odds, that's because of their philosophy and way of doing things. To outsiders, they are still the closest partners. In this way, the store manager naturally thought that his arrival was due to the recommendation of Natasha and Captain America. It's just that, unfortunately, Natasha and Captain America may be more wary of you than you think. Thinking of this, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, also took the ceramic black jar and asked, "Can this jar really open anything?" "There is nothing you can't think of that you can't open." Hearing this very confident answer, Dr. Banner narrowed his eyes slightly and asked tentatively. "In this world, there is no real creation out of nothing, nor is there." Before Dr. Banner could finish, Lu Chen interrupted him with a teasing smile. "No, creating something out of nothing does exist. You don't realize this simply because you and I are standing at different heights." As he spoke, Lu Chen seemed to have thought of something, and he looked at Dr. Banner deeply again, and said meaningfully. "Just like now, with your perfect combination of strength and wisdom, are you really stronger than it?" Upon hearing this, Dr. Banner's face froze for a rare moment, and then he seemed to realize something, and said in a rare deep voice. "This has nothing to do with what I said, right? It really doesn't matter, I just want to change the subject." Lu Chen smiled and said very bluntly. He didn't like talking to people who were too smart. Such people would always look for everything to constantly test. And Lu Chen hated these things. But one thing is certain, Dr. Banner is definitely not as strong as the Hulk. The Hulk hidden in Banner's body is a rare monster in this universe. All his abilities are related to his emotions, and the angrier he is, the stronger he is. But for such a monster, there is no upper limit to his anger. In other words, his strength will rise endlessly. Fortunately, such a terrible monster chose to die because of some of his own problems and Dr. Banner's blockade. Silence fell. Otherwise, it is hard to say whether Thanos, who has now become a farmer, can defeat the Avengers. And now, Dr. Banner thinks that he is now a perfect combination of strength and wisdom, but he has overlooked a fundamental problem. His proud wisdom has artificially restricted the Hulk's most powerful reliance: anger. Reason and anger are not easy to coexist in the Hulk. At this time, taking a deep breath, Dr. Banner did not pursue it further. He did not want to discuss the Hulk. That fool slacked off at several critical moments and almost killed him. Dr. Banner remembered this in his heart. $100,000 for a jar. Yes. Nodding, Lu Chen politely took out the POS machine. Few people who can come here bring cash. As for the equivalent items, Lu Chen has reason to believe that they will continue to appear when the jars are purchased for the third, fourth, and even later time. After all, 100,000 is not difficult for these capable people. Moreover, there are big customers like Iron Man Tony. Until now, Lu Chen is looking forward to it. If the guy Iron Man Tony goes crazy, he can use his own wealth to smash a few jars. 7 or 8. As for 9, it should be unlikely. 8 are equivalent to $1 trillion US. Such a huge amount, not to mention whether it can be taken out, just taking it out will break the capital chain of this planet. Moreover, there is one point that needs to be made clear. If the US dollar depreciates, Lu Chen has reason to believe that the system guy will raise the price of the jar very unceremoniously. He slowly stretched out his right hand and pressed on the pottery jar. It was at this moment that Zor was shocked to find that the pottery jar, which was as big as an ordinary person's head, was not as big as this guy's palm. Moreover, more importantly, through the cuffs of the black robe, Zor saw a faint hint of dark green. Green. Is this the Hulk? Zor's pupils shrank as he looked at the figure with a rare look of shock. The legendary superhero was so powerful that countless people were terrified. Although there were few reports about this superhero, people who follow superheroes know one thing, that is, never ignore a green-skinned giant. Because that is a terrifying existence praised by experts as, one hand can lift a mountain. At this moment, Dr. Banner seemed to have noticed the waiter's surprise, so he lifted up his hat, revealing his face, and then grinned. Sure enough, I don't like being stuck in my robes. You are being low-key. After responding, Lu Chen looked at Dr. Banner with a hint of expectation. According to previous experience, the more powerful the person, the more. No, it should be more accurate to say that the quality of opening a can is not only determined by luck, but also by subjective factors such as strength, determination, strong inner desire, etc. This is not difficult to understand. A person who is truly worth looking forward to should be top-notch in all aspects. It is not surprising for such a person to open good things. On the contrary, it is surprising that guys like Alger and Ice Girl can open good things. However, after thinking about it, Lu Chen's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a strange smile. In fact, Alger and Ice Girl may not open two good things. One is suspected to have frozen emotions and turned into a cold-blooded person, while the other is almost swallowed up by his mind. They are not much better. But Zor, because he sacrificed himself to the devil and was willing to be favored by the devil, opened a holy cloth to suppress ghosts and gods. In this way, it can be seen that opening a can is not just as simple as luck. At this moment, as if he had thought of something, Lu Chen's eyes suddenly flickered, and then he looked at the Hulk who was about to open the can, and said, "Our store recently has a new rule, did you know?" Huh, what? Dr. Banner was stunned and asked. That's right. As he spoke, Lu Chen pointed to a new store rule hanging on the counter not far away and said bluntly, "As the promotion ends, our store will take the initiative to collect one of the 3 items ordered by customers." Quote. After a moment of silence, Dr. Banner looked at a small blackboard not far away. As expected, what came into view was a sentence like this. Okay, got it. Dr. Banner nodded and didn't say much. After all, this is a store, and it's normal for the discount to end now. However, what surprised him a little was why this guy said it at this time. Shaking his head, Dr. Banner was also a little puzzled. At the same time, after receiving a positive response from Dr. Banner, Lu Chen's mouth corners slightly raised. It's done. Yes, it's done. Originally, a very outstanding existence like the Hulk should have obtained 3 things. However, because he was too outstanding, Lu Chen had rare expectations. Not only was he looking forward to what he could get, but he was also looking forward to owning one of the things. However, this behavior was not allowed by the regulations. At least, now, a cold reminder sounded in Lu Chen's ears. Ding, warning, if the host behaves similarly again, there will be punishment. No punishment this time, Lu Chen laughed in his heart and said jokingly. Ding, this is the imperfection of this system, which has given the host a loophole to exploit. However, now, I solemnly remind you that the host cannot ask for anything offered by the first-level guest in various ways. First-level guests are distinguished guests who have won the unanimous recognition of the system and Lu Chen. Most of these guests are extraordinary and have a good status. For example, the Emperor of the Universe, Thanos, is also a first-level guest. As for guests like Captain America and Natasha, they are second-level guests. And later, there are third-level guests like Zor and Alger. According to the rules set by the system and Lu Chen can only ask for 1 or 2 items from the 3 items of the third-level guests. However, now, Lu Chen took advantage of the asymmetry of information and a small loophole in the system to ask for an item from the first-level guest, the Hulk. This is a successful calculation. At this moment, Dr. Banner also grabbed the pottery jar with one hand. Crack, accompanied by this sound, the pottery jar exploded. Then, with a boom, a dazzling golden light suddenly bloomed. Squinting his eyes, looking at the thing that appeared in the golden light, Lu Chen's pupils shrank rarely. A piece of parchment, densely packed with countless words. Armament hockey. From a strange world, it is an ability that can be cultivated and continuously improved. It can improve defense and attack power, and it acts like invisible armor, and can also evolve into attack power. Note: this is a very scary ability. The scariest thing about it is that the stronger the body, the more terrifying the armament hockey it cultivates. By the way, because it is a system product, it is guaranteed that even in other worlds, it can be cultivated through the guidance of parchment. However, this is only one chance. Armament hockey. Muttering, Lu Chen's eyes turned to the Hulk Dr. Banner not far away, and his eyes twitched rarely. Although he was covered in black robes, Lu Chen could vaguely see the large muscles that looked like granite. It must be said that in terms of physique, the Hulk can definitely be classified as a monster. And now, such a being actually wants to master armament hockey. Silently mourning for the Hulk's future enemies for 3 seconds, Lu Chen also smiled. He immediately grabbed the parchment, handed it to the Hulk, and introduced directly. This is something that suits you. Is it suitable for me? Feeling the texture of the parchment in his hand, Dr. Banner was also suspicious. Obviously, for a person like him, there are few things that can attract him. This is a kind of power. After practicing, it can increase your strength to a certain extent. After a brief introduction, Lu Chen described the armament hockey in his own words. However, it must be said that the brain circuit of smart people is still worthy of praise. In just a few breaths, as if he understood something, Dr. Banner looked at the parchment with a bit of heat. The stronger the physique, the more terrifying the power that can be cultivated. Muttering, Dr. Banner also followed Lu Chen's instructions, clasped his hands on the parchment, and slowly moved his palms. Boom! With a roar, the densely packed words began to wriggle like tadpoles. Then, in front of Dr. Banner's astonished eyes, the words actually spread up along his palm. What is this? Dr. Banner said in surprise, but he did not resist. The instinct of a strong man did not make him feel threatened. And more importantly, as these tadpole-shaped words spread, a sense of coolness also surged into his heart. Boom! There was another roar, and Dr. Banner felt his body shaken. Boom, boom, boom. There were loud noises like thunder, one after another, and Dr. Banner's entire body swelled up a bit. At this moment, a wisp of black air slowly flowed out of Dr. Banner's body. It was deep and heavy, and looked like ink, full of sticky. It's really a monster. With a sigh, Lu Chen's pupils shrank as he looked at this ray of armament hockey. In his memory, no one in that world could cultivate such a strong armament hockey. Especially, this was just the beginning, and the illusory armament hockey on the Hulk was as real as it was real. Tisk, Lu Chen said, this is what I call armament hockey. It can transform into a set of armor that covers you, which can both increase your defense and increase your attack power in disguise. Indeed, it is true. Nodding, Dr. Banner agreed, which was rare. Countless information was flowing in his mind. Although he had not studied it yet, he also understood that armament hockey was a very basic knowledge. And at this moment, as if he had thought of something, Dr. Banner's heart moved. Then, in his curious eyes, wisps of black air had already wrapped around his fist. Yes, wrapped. One of the uses of armament hockey comes from the unknown. Although there are not many black airflows, only a few wisps, under Dr. Banner's intentional midair, it turned into a net, tightly wrapping his fist. And at the moment of wrapping, an invisible oppression had already come from Dr. Banner's fist. In the fierceness, there was a touch of heaviness, but it was like a huge stone weighing thousands of pounds pressing on the heart. Just one glance makes people instinctively afraid. Do you want to try it? A rare chuckle suddenly fell into Dr. Banner's ear. Looking up and glancing at Lu Chen not far away, Dr. Banner also grinned, do you want to taste my fist? As he said that, Dr. Banner also proudly raised his right fist. Very good, this feeling is very good. The entanglement of armed color domineering made him feel an unprecedented power. And it was this kind of power that made Dr. Banner feel difficult to control himself. Although he hasn't tried it yet, he can feel how heavy his right fist is at this moment. However, after a moment, looking at Lu Chen, who still had a smile on his lips, Dr. Banner's expression suddenly became serious, and he said solemnly, are you serious? Of course. Nodding, Lu Chen's eyes showed a hint of anticipation. Although with his current strength, it is difficult to resist the Hulk's fist. But in this store, with his almost invincible defense, he is not afraid. Moreover, such an opportunity can not only let him understand the gap between him and the real top heroes, but also further create a mysterious and powerful image among these superheroes. Why not? Thinking of this, Lu Chen stepped forward and said calmly, come on, let me see how heavy your fist is. Interesting, smiled, and a hint of anticipation appeared in the depths of Dr. Banner's eyes. Moreover, with such an opportunity, it seems to be a good opportunity to test the bottom line of this mysterious store manager. Call. Exhaling deeply, Dr. Banner slowly clenched his fists. Click, click, with one sound after another, like the sound of bones crackling, Dr. Banner's right fist suddenly sank. With the naked eye, an invisible wind pressure was visible from his fist. Moreover, what made people's pupils shrink was that as he continued to accumulate power, like a gathering storm, one hurricane after another continued to converge. Boom! With a terrible roar, a fist suddenly came close to Lu Chen. However, before Lu Chen could react, boom! The condensed fist wind exploded in an instant. In an instant, the shop covering an area of more than 100 square meters was like a tsunami, with wind and waves everywhere. At this moment, Lu Chen stared at a fist wrapped in black airflow that had stopped in front of him, and his eyes condensed. Terrible, really terrible, even his spider sense did not notice it at the first time. More importantly, it was visible to the naked eye that an invisible airflow surrounding Lu Chen seemed to be concave. Although it did not break, such a heavy fist was not given by even Thanos at the beginning. Thinking of this, Lu Chen took a deep look at Dr. Banner in front of him with a solemn face, and fell into a rare silence. This guy, because of the appearance of the armed color domineering, has indeed made a qualitative improvement in strength. Moreover, the armed color now is only a few strands. If he can cultivate to the terrifying realm of covering the whole body in the future, this guy's strength may be pushed into a more terrifying state in one fell swoop. At this moment, a hoarse and solemn voice slowly spread in the air. You are very strong. After saying that, Dr. Banner slowly retracted his fist. Although his expression did not change much, in his heart, Dr. Banner's fear of this black-haired figure has increased to an extreme. This is a guy who cannot be provoked. With a sigh in his heart, Dr. Banner also compared him with that Thanos in his mind. Because, until now, there are really not many people who can take his punch and leave without injury. And that Thanos is one of them. However, the problem is that Thanos is a terrifying existence known as the Emperor of the Universe. What about this guy? Who is he? Where does he come from? Thinking of this, Dr. Banner's heart is also rarely heavy. It is not a good thing for this planet to have such an existence. However, before the Hulk could ponder for any longer, Lu Chen on the side had handed over a book again. What is this? Dr. Banner was stunned. Now that you have verified it, I believe that you have already understood the power of armament hockey. Lu Chen waved his hand. Call. Like a breeze blowing across the face, the entire store was restored to order after being in such a mess caused by the Hulk's fist. At this moment, Lu Chen's voice came slowly. If armament hockey is of great help to your strength, then I believe you will like the second item, this book. Books. After a moment's pause, Dr. Banner reached out and took the book. Then, he glanced at the cover and narrowed his eyes. Saved. The name of the book was a bit obscure, and the entire cover was dark, giving off a sense of oppression. However, at this moment, as if he had noticed something, Dr. Banner suddenly raised his head. After a moment, he saw a pair of eyes full of teasing. Can you tell me what this is? He tried to open the book, but it felt as heavy as a stone slab. Apparently, this book was not that easy to open. It is a book, a very interesting book. Pursing his lips, Lu Chen could not hide the smile on his face. Even he did not expect that Dr. Banner would come up with such a strange thing. The reason why it is strange is that this book tells the story of a male protagonist who, for the balance and stability of the universe, does not hesitate to reverse time and space and rush to the future, but ends up being besieged. In the end, it is this male protagonist who is one step behind and can only sigh, sit in the sunset, and quietly wait for death. Yes, you heard it right. Does it look familiar? At the first moment, Lu Chen has already associated it with the past Thanos. If the guess is correct, this should be a magical interpretation of the future. It's just that the characters and the environment in this book are not consistent. Although the metaphor is very deep, whether it can be seen depends on the ability of the Avengers. Thinking of this, Lu Chen also took the initiative to speak. If you want to read this book, you can leave the store and open it. Got it. Nodding, Dr. Banner also noticed Lu Chen's teasing expression when he looked at the book. Although he didn't quite understand what that meant. But he could vaguely feel that this book might be a little important. Thinking of this, Dr. Banner also silently put the heavy book back into his black robe, and then, with a slightly sharp gaze, he looked at the last item shrouded in golden light. A fruit, a very strange fruit. The appearance is a dark purple oval watermelon with purple spiral patterns on it, and the shape is similar to that of a rugby ball. However, as if he thought of something, Dr. Banner also shook his head slightly. He shook his head. Although he didn't know what this thing was. But it was obvious that this thing should not belong to him. After all, according to the store manager, he could only own 2 of the 3 items. Smiling, Dr. Banner didn't care. 1. Armament hockey already made him feel extremely satisfied. If he had previously called himself the perfect fusion of wisdom and strength, he still lacked confidence. Now, he just had to wait for him to completely master the armament hockey. The Hulk, who once shocked the crowd, will truly return. With a grin on his lips, Dr. Banner bowed deeply and said sincerely. This time, the harvest was fruitful, thanks to the store manager. I am just a businessman. You got what you wanted, and I got what I wanted, that's all. Lu Chen's mouth curled up slightly, and his eyes inadvertently glanced at the fruit shrouded in golden light, with a rare hint of excitement in his eyes. Gravity fruit. A magical fruit from a world like the ocean, with incredible power, capable of generating gravity waves, and capable of manipulating the strength and direction of gravity at will. Including gravity, lateral gravity, zero gravity, anti-gravity, pressure, tension, repulsion, and attraction. Introduction. This is an extremely terrifying fruit, with a power that even the truly powerful cannot ignore. At one time, it was even hailed as one of the top fruits. Feeling the information from the unknown, Lu Chen looked at the fruit not far away, his eyes flickering uncontrollably. It must be said that such a devil fruit is definitely not something that ordinary people can open. If the things that were opened before were mostly defective products with certain side effects or like the ghost swordsman's ore, they needed to constantly change jobs to truly dominate the world. Then this fruit, at the moment it appeared, meant real natural disaster. In memory, the man who held this fruit once raised gravity to a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers from the ground, pulling down a meteorite with high temperature and blazing flames. Such power is no less than a natural disaster, and can even be said to destroy the heavens and the earth. However, considering that world is different from the Marvel world, pulling down a meteorite like that is not necessarily possible in the Marvel world. After all, not to mention other things, just the problem of locking requires at least 4-digit attribute mental power to pass through layers of distance and pull the mental power to the sky. However, even so, no one can ignore the terrifying power contained in such a small fruit. Lu Chen grinned, and a rare excitement appeared on his face. At this time, a voice suddenly came from afar. Then, store manager, I will leave first. Looking for the sound, the Hulk Dr. Banner was once again wrapped in a black robe, walking out of the store. Nodding, Lu Chen also smiled and said, welcome to visit us next time. I will. After a pause, Dr. Banner turned around and spoke firmly. Then he seemed to remember something and said politely, do you need me to help you promote it? Propaganda. Lu Chen was stunned. He didn't expect Dr. Banner to suddenly say this. Yes, publicity, I need to go find Thor this time, I believe he will be interested in yours. With a smile, Dr. Banner's eyes also showed a touch of reminiscence. Thor, the god of thunder who is in charge of war and agriculture in Norse mythology, is also the eldest son of Odin, the father of the gods. If Iron Man symbolizes science, then the pure-blooded Thor symbolizes mythology. Moreover, Thor, holding a battle axe, has always been one of the top fighters in the Avengers and is not inferior to the Hulk. However, there has been no news about this guy for a long time. I heard from Captain America that he seems to be hiding in a corner for retirement. Alas, Dr. Banner sighed imperceptibly, and thought of some bad things. However, before he could immerse himself in it any further, a light laugh sounded in his ears. If you can bring other guests, I can give you a discount. No problem. Raising his big arms, Dr. Banner did not refuse. After all, such a mysterious shop does have a lot of good things. Moreover, more importantly, as the god of thunder, Thor, he should know something about this mysterious shop. Thinking of this, a rare gleam of light flashed in the depths of Dr. Banner's eyes. I hope you are not an enemy. In the rare silence, Dr. Banner turned around and strode into the darkness. Looking at Dr. Banner's departing back, Lu Chen's mouth curled up slightly. Thor, that guy, should be a very good guest. Lu Chen smiled, but didn't care too much. However, one thing worth mentioning is that the Avengers are now gathering their old subordinates, probably to snipe Thanos. Thinking of this, Lu Chen slowly raised his head. Looking through the window at the boundless starry sky, Lu Chen's eyes flickered. I wonder how that guy is doing now. With a chuckle in his heart, Lu Chen once again turned his gaze to the devil fruit not far away. Zoel, pour me a drink. Okay, store manager. With a slight bow, Zor, who had been waiting for a long time, walked to the counter and took down a bottle of wine. At this time, Lu Chen came to the gravity fruit quietly. Looking at it carefully, Lu Chen's eyes became more and more fiery. Dark purple, with spiral patterns of varying depths, which is exactly the same as the strange appearance of the devil fruit in Lu Chen's memory. It has to be said that the devil fruit is indeed a bit ugly. Moreover, it is said that the taste is not ordinary. However, what's the harm? Compared with further strengthening the strength, some things are tolerable. However, the only thing that Lu Chen is a little concerned about is that the devil fruit seems to be afraid of the power of sea stone. However, after a moment, as if thinking of something, Lu Chen couldn't help shaking his head again. What really restrains the devil fruit is the seawater in the pirate world and the special substance in the sea stone. In the Marvel world, there is no such special substance, and the possibility of being restrained is very small. In other words, in this world, the power of the devil fruit is difficult to suppress. Thinking of this, Lu Chen also dispelled the last worry. P.S. There has always been a lot of controversy about whether devil fruits in other worlds, here referring to the Marvel world, will be restrained by seawater. However, Kasumi is inclined to believe that the seawater in the Marvel universe cannot suppress the power of devil fruits. It was night, in a dimly lit shop. There was a small table, a glass of wine, and a strange-looking fruit. At this time, Lu Chen was sitting quietly at the table, staring blankly at the devil fruit on the table. It is said that the taste of the devil fruit seems to be extraordinary. With a twitch in his eye, Lu Chen couldn't help but think of chocolate that tasted like shit and shit that tasted like chocolate. Both were not very friendly choices. However, thinking of the power of the devil fruit, Lu Chen couldn't suppress his excitement. You know, there are many types of devil fruits, and the gravity fruit is a powerful fruit that stands at the top of the dominance among the superhuman fruits. Not to mention other things, the destructive power alone is not less than the legendary incarnation of natural disasters, the natural fruit. Moreover, more importantly, the use of the gravity fruit is more diversified. As some people say, the development of the devil fruit requires imagination. And just so, for the development of the gravity fruit, Lu Chen already has several mature routes in his mind. Lu Chen took a deep breath and focused his eyes. Then he picked up a spoon on the table and gently scooped a spoonful of the purple spiral-shaped gravity fruit. After a while, accompanied by a strange chewing sound, Lu Chen's face changed. It seemed to be green, and then white. Zoel, who was standing next to him, also had a strange look on his face. Manager, is it really that unpalatable? Zor was speechless when he spoke so rarely. Quote. Silence, rare silence. After Lu Chen swallowed this mouthful and drank the wine that had been prepared in one gulp, he spoke quietly. You can try. As he said this, Lu Chen had already pushed the remaining devil fruit towards Zor. Only the first bite after the fruit is cut open can gain the power of the fruit, and the people who share it afterwards will not have any changes. In this way, Lu Chen naturally does not mind Zoel tasting this kind of human, silly, taste. However, when he pushed the devil fruit to Zoel, his face suddenly changed. Boom! Along with an invisible breath, a feeling called oppression suddenly came from all directions. Invisibly, Lu Chen could clearly feel a sticky feeling in the air. What was even more incredible was that he had a feeling in his heart that he could move this sticky feeling. Slowly standing up, Lu Chen closed his eyes and began to quietly experience the inexplicable feeling. At this moment, what Lu Chen did not notice was that his four-dimensional attribute was quietly rising. Especially the attribute spirit, which was rising at a speed visible to the naked eye as he immersed himself in it. Gravity fruit is really incredible. After a long time, Lu Chen sighed and slowly opened his hands. Wow, wow, wow. In Zor's incredible eyes, the whole store seemed to be weightless. The tables, wine glasses, and even other people were slowly floating in the air. No, not floating, but as if they had lost gravity and were blown up by a gust of wind. At this moment, there was only one person standing quietly in the whole store, as if he had not noticed anything. Manager. In this rare reminder, Zor's voice has reached Lu Chen's ears. After a slight pause, as if he noticed something, Lu Chen pressed his hand again. After a moment, bang, bang, bang. As countless things fell into the air, the entire store was in chaos. Lu Chen slowly opened his eyes and didn't care. They were all external objects. The jar that he valued the most was protected by a mysterious power, which could resist Lu Chen's casual power. Manager, what are you doing? Zoel, who was not far away, was speechless and asked in astonishment. Gravity, the gravity that I can control freely. As he said this, Lu Chenshu pressed his hand. Bang! Zor, who was caught off guard, felt a pressure coming from all directions. He was pressed to the ground. Gravity suppression. The most superficial use of the gravity fruit is to violently strengthen the gravity of the air, so that the overweight air falls and suppresses the human body and makes it unable to move. Now, although Lu Chen pressed with his empty hands, with the terrifying spiritual attribute, the force of his pressure was several tons at most. Looking up, the ground where Zor was pressed had already cracked, revealing cracks like spider webs. Here, it is worth mentioning that the power of the gravity fruit is closely related to Lu Chen's spiritual attribute. His mastery and control of gravity all rely on the power of the spiritual attribute. It is precisely because of this that he can have such power after only eating the gravity fruit for a short while. This is like in that world, a man named Blackbeard relied on his own strength to quickly pass the period of mastering the power of the fruit and exert the true power of the fruit in an instant. And now, Lu Chen is the same. However, in addition to relying on the strength of spiritual power, other attributes are also more or less dependent. For example, now, Lu Chen has noticed a slight consumption of physical strength. Yes, a slight consumption. Relying on his triple-digit physique, Lu Chen's physical strength has long surpassed that of ordinary people, comparable to a real monster. In this way, even if it is the first time to control gravity, it will not bring too much burden to him. Ghost Slash shouted, and the blonde Zor's eyes instantly turned red, and his entire right arm was burning with a deep red. Then, in Lu Chen's astonished eyes, a half-moon-shaped sword energy swept out. Ghost, only people infected by ghosts can use this evil move. The moment you release Ghost Slash, your mind is already controlled by the ghost. Swish. With a strange hissing sound, the sword energy broke through the air and reached in front of Lu Chen. This was the daily sparring between Zuo'er and Lu Chen. However, this time the sparring was a little different from the usual ones. Call. He exhaled deeply, and as he looked at the crescent-shaped sword energy, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes. Then, he raised his right hand. Gravity rebounds. Along with this whisper, in an instant, circles of wave rings bloomed from Lu Chen's hands. Gravity rebound. Use the power of the gravity fruit to release a gravity circle. Objects and attacks close to the gravity circle will be exerted with a huge reverse force, thus achieving the effect of rebounding. Bang! There was another roar. In Zor's surprised eyes, his Ghost Slash suddenly stopped and stopped steadily in front of the circles of purple light. What is this? He was stunned for a moment, but before Zor could continue to speak, the next second, with his mouth twitching, the Ghost Slash he pulled out with all his strength suddenly flew back. Zor's face changed drastically, and he was in a bad mood. What a joke. There is such a trick. Although you are the store manager, you promised to use the same power as me. Then, you use the same power to play such a trick with me. With a confused look on his face, Zor pulled away decisively. However, looking at the half-moon-shaped sword energy that had been pulled in front of him, Zor's face darkened, and he had already imagined the tragedy that would follow. However, at this moment, the hurried footsteps echoed in the basement in an instant. Then, as if teleporting, there was a faint roar. Roar. A dark shadow has already appeared in front of Zor. Bang. He clasped his hands together, as if catching a blade with his bare hands. The burly figure wearing a clown mask had already blocked the way of Ghost Slash. Roar. There was another low roar, mixed with a hint of excitement. In front of Zor's stunned eyes, his Ghost Slash was actually blocked. Yes, it was blocked. Zor's pupils shrank slightly as he looked at Alger's palms that were constantly oozing blood, and he said with rare sincerity. Thanks. Hey. Alger smiled foolishly and said nothing. He just stared blankly at the scarred wound, speechless. At this moment, Lu Chen walked over slowly and looked at Alger's scarred wound, and also smiled. Your body is now a real monster, and it can withstand a few missiles. It seems he is still growing. Amidst the suspicious voice, Alger also tried to clench his fist. It was still the same as always, as if there was no end. Today, he can still feel his body slowly getting stronger. Hearing this, Lu Chen sighed. It must be said that the ascension magic is indeed terrifying. Even a defective version of it has pushed Alger to the level of a monster. Moreover, this kind of monster will continue to grow stronger as time goes by. However, what is the price? Naturally, his mind is devoured. Although he was now suppressed by the clown mask, it was obvious that Alger's mind was already wavering, sometimes clear, sometimes confused, like a fool. At this moment, Lu Chen seemed to have noticed Zor's absent-mindedness and spoke to comfort him. The power of the devil fruit is terrifying, and my gravity fruit is at the top of the control system. In this way, even if I suppress my power again and again, it will be difficult for you to resist. Is that so? Zor sighed and looked helpless. After all, He finally had extraordinary power, but he found himself to be a weakling. Not to mention the store manager, Alger's power was growing day by day, which made him feel unwilling. After all, he was still a teenager. Even if he was possessed by ghosts and gods, he could not erase the spirit that belonged to a teenager. Seeing this, Lu Chen patted Zor on the shoulder and said, "Get out. Go out." After a pause, Zor suddenly raised his head and said in astonishment, "Yes, go out, take Alger with you, and go explore the world together." As Lu Chen said this, he walked towards the corridor. Just as Lu Chen's voice gradually disappeared in the basement, a voice finally came. "When you have completely digested the power, I will allow you to open the jar a second time." Back to the shop upstairs, Lu Chen slowly leaned on the sofa. With the general as a reference, he developed the use of gravity fruit very quickly. Now, in just 1 or 2 days, he has mastered gravity rebound, weightlessness control, and even another form of gravity, repulsive gravity, is also faintly touched. Thinking of this, Lu Chen opened his hand. Boom! With a burst of purple waves blooming, the wine bottle standing on the counter far away was pulled over. Gravity, in other words, is the force exerted on the wine bottle in the opposite direction of gravity. In this way, the form of force it exhibits is really like gravity. However, Lu Chen understood that this was not gravity after all. The real gravity should be that with him as the carrier, the mass and density continue to increase until it forms a terrible suction force like a black hole. However, if it reaches that level, not to mention whether his body can bear it, the control of gravity alone will have to rise to 1 or 2 levels. Moreover, looking out the window at the boundless starry sky, Lu Chen's thoughts were infinitely elevated. But after a moment, he shook his head to get rid of the dizziness in his mind. Lu Chen was helpless. It was really difficult to pull the meteorite from space. Until now, his idea could not even fly out of this planet. Of course, there is one thing that cannot be ignored. If he can really use the meteorite from outer space as a means of attack, its power will surely destroy the world. Not to mention other things, a city like New York, a Queens area, is enough to be destroyed in an instant. And at this moment, step, step, step. Looking in the direction of the sound, Lu Chen saw 2 figures packing their bags. One figure was a handsome young man with a black belt wrapped around his arms. Although he was wearing casual clothes, he looked fierce. The other figure was wearing a mask, looking funny and ridiculous like a clown. "Manager, we are leaving now." After bowing respectfully, Zoel said seriously, "Go ahead, go out and explore the world." At this point, as if he had thought of something, Lu Chen reminded him again, "Don't go too far, superheroes in this world are no joke." Hearing this, Zor's mouth curled up slightly, and he said half-jokingly, "Manager, my dream was to be a superhero." Quote. Lu Chen raised his eyebrows slightly, and a hint of amusement appeared on his face. "The idea is good. It's just a pity that now that you have become a ghost swordsman, you don't have many choices." Thinking of this, Lu Chen didn't say much. Zor is his first favor, and Lu Chen doesn't want to interfere too much. Moreover, he has already decided on the profession. Next, if there are no accidents, a young man who controls ghosts and gods should be known throughout the world in the near future. As for whether it is a saint or a demon, that is not what Lu Chen considers. Anyway, he is just doing business and strengthening himself by the way, that's all. Soon after Zoel and Alger left, the shop returned to its former tranquility. If the shop had not been renovated, it would have been the same as when it first arrived in New York. Lu Chen smiled and slowly raised his arm. Boom! With the spread of the purple light wave, the whole store seemed to be weightless, and countless things were floating in the air. It was just a little surprising that these things were actually spinning around the whole store at an accelerated speed. However, what was even more surprising was that these things seemed to have eyes, but they had their own rules, and until now, they had not been touched. Control, very delicate control. And now, Lu Chen is practicing such delicate control. After all, when talking about the gravity fruit, one cannot help but think of the floating fruit owned by another strong man. In Lu Chen's view, the development of the gravity fruit can refer to the floating fruit to a certain extent. You know, in the pirate world, the devil fruit has a relationship called superiors and subordinates. And if there is no accident with the gravity fruit, it should be the superior of the floating fruit. Looking at the fruit ability alone, the light floating fruit can make the things touched ignore gravity and control them freely, while the gravity fruit can not only erase gravity but also reverse gravity. It can be said that what the light float fruit can do, the gravity fruit can do. But what the gravity fruit can do, the light float fruit may not be able to do. It is this gap that makes the status of the two clear at a glance. However, even so, it does not mean that the person holding the gravity fruit is necessarily stronger than the person holding the float fruit. The devil fruit, after all, depends on development. And in terms of development, the man named Golden Lion can use the power of the float fruit to control the blizzard, turning it into a blizzard in the shape of a lion's head to drown the enemy. And this kind of extremely delicate control can at least leave other people behind by several streets. In this way, with the lessons learned from his predecessors, Lu Chen naturally chose to follow suit. Not to mention other things, just the extremely delicate control of gravity. Lu Chen can try to control his own clothes to make himself float. And here, it is worth mentioning that Lu Chen just tried to control his own gravity and wanted to make himself suspended in the air. However, surprisingly, it seemed to have failed. In this case, Lu Chen naturally had to start from other aspects. One is to control his own clothes, so that they lose gravity, so as to control them and lift himself up into the air. The second is that after the gravity control becomes more delicate, he can try to control the air and even all invisible forces to make himself float. And these two ideas require very high delicacy. Practice time always passes quickly, and in a blink of an eye, it is already past 4 in the afternoon. It's time to close the shop again. Lu Chen smiled and gently waved his hand, returning everything above the shop to its original position. Immediately, he raised his hand and an invisible force was already heading towards the open door of the shop. Just as the force was about to touch the door, Lu Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Long time no see, my first guest." The rare intimate voice seemed to convey the joy of "goodbye. Manager, you are still so idle." The cold voice remained the same, but it rarely showed a trace of fatigue. And at this moment, Zizi, along with the strange sound, a path of ice crossed the store door. Then, the ice stopped not far from Lu Chen and solidified. Screw, screw, screw. Amidst the goosebump-inducing voices, a girl in an ice-blue dress slowly appeared in front of Lu Chen. The ice girl, Mo Li, Lu Chen's first guest on this planet, had the blood of ice. Now it seems that this girl has mastered the power of ice very well. She has also mastered the glacier path involving space. Glacier Trail releases a group of icy claws. At the same time, the user can use the coordinates of this group of icy claws to travel through space. This is a very scary method. Now that Mo Li can master this method skillfully, it can be seen that this beautiful girl with a very high appearance has spent a lot of time honing her ice bloodline during this period. Thinking of this, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly, and looked at the girl for a rare time. It is still the same as before, but the long ice blue hair not long ago has been pulled to the hips. However, what is surprising is the girl's pretty face, which is as if covered with a layer of frost and is very cold. Of course, there is one thing that cannot be ignored, that is, the girl in front of him seems to be very tired, and there is a faint trace of fatigue in her expression. "You don't look like you've been doing well recently," Lu Chen jokingly asked. "Well," Molly sighed softly but said nothing more. She immediately put down the metal box in her hand and said coldly, "This is $1 million, I want to buy a second jar." $1 million US. Lifting the heavy weight of the metal box, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a teasing smile, "I smell blood on you." Hearing this, Molly shook her head, which was rare, and said helplessly, "I don't want to either." As she spoke, the girl lowered her eyes, as if she was in deep thought. After a long time, she spoke. "They're too clingy." "Who are they?" Lu Chen was slightly stunned and asked curiously. "Police, Special Forces, Shield." She spat out one word after another coldly, but at this moment, as if she had thought of something, Molly gritted her teeth, revealed a hint of resentment, and added, "And that Hydra." Hydra. Lu Chen was slightly startled as he showed a rare look of suspicion. Hydra, a very large and terrifying organization, once infiltrated the strongest organization in this country, Shield, and use the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. to create panic and make huge profits. Although a few years ago, due to the cooperation between S.H.I.E.L.D. and superheroes, this organization was repeatedly hit hard and even nearly destroyed. But even Captain America, their opponent, found it hard to believe that this organization would really disappear in the long river of history. Because no one knew the horror of this organization better than him. It is said that, cut off a head and 2 heads will grow to replace it. Its scale is enough to cover the whole world. And this is not the most terrifying. The most terrifying organization can be traced back to various histories, even thousands of years ago. Its deep background and many secrets are far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. As a result, Captain America and even more superheroes find it difficult to believe that such an organization will be completely destroyed. However, one thing is worth affirming, that is, this organization should be the weakest at present. The major leaders are dead or run away, and the remaining scattered sands are also defeated by the old rival S.H.I.E.L.D. And according to what Molly said now, this organization is likely to revive again. Did this organization do anything? Suppressing the rare surprise in his heart, Lu Chen turned around and walked towards the pottery jar on the counter, and then asked casually. What did you do? She subconsciously crossed her arms around her chest and hugged her body tightly. A hint of murderous intent flashed in the depths of Molly's eyes. She would never forget, that group of fools actually took advantage of her serious injury and chased her madly, so that she had to jump into the sea. If it weren't for the cold sea water that restored her consciousness, she would not even be able to get here. Thinking of this, Molly bit her lips until they turned white. However, after a moment, as if she thought of something, Molly suddenly looked at Lu Chen not far away and said coldly. Do you know this organization? Raising his eyebrows, Lu Chen, who was holding the pottery jar, did not deny it. Hydra, a very old terrorist organization, has always been unscrupulous in its pursuit of the extraordinary. If they find out that you control ice. Before he finished speaking, Lu Chen's face was full of amusement. It must be said that the appearance of Hydra did arouse some interest in him. An organization like this should not lack real elites. Moreover, because of their madness and evil, Lu Chen suspected that one of them might be able to extract the first soul for him. He shook his head and suppressed the thoughts in his mind. If this organization is capable, they will naturally come, so there is no need to be too anxious. Right now, the most important thing is to take care of this guest. With a smile, Lu Chen placed the pottery jar in front of the girl. Can you tell me more about this organization? During this rare inquiry, Molly's face showed a rare solemnity. Recalling those high-tech weapons and those figures whose skills were comparable to those of special forces, even she was a little afraid now. Her ice power was limited after all. In the midst of those who came one after another, she was almost forced into a desperate situation. This shows how terrifying this organization is. If she hadn't felt that she had won in the end, and a woman with a long whip and a scar on her face appeared, claiming to be Hydra, and invited her to join, she would probably not know the name of this mysterious organization until now. Tisk tisk, I don't recommend you to provoke this organization. With a playful smile, Lu Chen suggested seriously. Although Molly is very strong now, she is still too young to compete with such a behemoth. However, as if he had thought of something, Lu Chen looked at the pottery jar not far away and said with a smile. Of course, you don't have no chance. Opportunity. As if she understood something, Molly's eyes were also attracted by the pottery jar. If there was anything that could keep her coming here, it would be the incredible pottery jar here. I understand. Nodding, Molly said no more. Although it was just a one-time meeting, she had already discovered that this mysterious store manager would not talk much about anything other than buying and selling pottery jars. However, this was enough. With the things that came out of this pottery jar, she would definitely let those guys know what true despair was. Thinking of this, Molly's eyes suddenly condensed. Freeze it. With a cold shout, countless ice spikes shot out from all directions and reached the pottery jar. There was a very crisp sound of click, and then a golden light bloomed. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.